City officials say since August of 2022, over 19,000 people have arrived, with more than 3,000 still awaiting placement. Officials say 28 buses from border states rolled into Chicago last week alone. The African-American mayor, Brandon Johnson, has sent a delegation to Texas to learn more about just how migrant relocation works. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Hey, if you're thinking of getting the latest iPhone, you need to stop and check out the wireless offer from Boost Infinite. For more, just pick up your phone and dial pound 250 and say Boost Infinite. That's pound 250 and Boost Infinite. You'll have the option to receive a one-time auto-dialed text message from this station's network.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Tough day yesterday for both of LA's NFL teams. The Rams lose at home to Pittsburgh by a touchdown. The Chargers lose at Kansas City by 2 touchdowns. The Rams failed to score in the fourth quarter. They dropped to 3-4. 3 of their 4 losses have come at SoFi. The Rams are at home next Sunday against Chicago. The Chargers are now 2-4. They went scoreless the entire second half at KC. The Chargers are at Dallas next Sunday. The top 5 in this week's AP college football rankings: Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, and Washington. USC, which has lost 2 straight, fell to 24th. UCLA at 5-2 is ranked 23rd. It's the first time UCLA has been ranked ahead of USC in the polls since 2012. UCLA is at home this Saturday against Deion Sanders in Colorado. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your beer.
Keep following the leader.
Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
1, 2, 3, go! I'm gonna try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, but I'll be alright as long as I can find the groove. Yes, I will. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. Don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while. Yes, I will. I'm just happy to see you talk to me back in style again.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley, and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavissmileyshow.com. That's thetavissmileyshow.com, or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, a conversation with human and civil rights activist and writer Kevin Powell about his new book, The Kevin Powell Reader, Essential Writings and Conversations. We'll also discuss his latest piece for Vibe about Martin Scorsese's epic film, Killers of the Flower Moon, which released in theaters over the weekend. At the film's premiere, Osage language consultant Christopher Coate shared his complicated feelings about the film.
I was nervous about the release of the film. Now that I've seen it, I have some strong opinions. As an Osage, I really wanted this to be from the perspective of Molly and what her family experienced. But I think it would take an Osage to do that. Martin Scorsese not being Osage, I think he did a great job representing our people. But this story is being told, this history is being told almost from the perspective of Ernest Burkhart. And they kind of give him this conscience, and they kind of depict that there's love. But when somebody conspires to murder your entire family, that's not love. That's not love. That's just beyond abuse. And I think in the end, the question that you can be left with is, how long will you be complacent with racism? How long will you go along with something and not say something, not speak up? How long will you be complacent? And I think that's because this film was not made for an Osage audience. It was made for everybody not Osage. For those that have been disenfranchised, they can relate. But for other countries, that have their acts and their histories of oppression, this is an opportunity for them to ask themselves this question of morality. And so that's how I feel. That's how I feel about this film.
That is what Osage film consultant Christopher Cope had to say about the film Killers of the Flower Moon. Kevin Powell calls the film a masterpiece, even with its flaws. He believes the film is the single most important work of art Scorsese has ever created, and that's saying a whole lot, given Scorsese's body of work. Powell goes on to say that it is the first movie depiction of Native Americans I've absorbed in my entire life, made by a white American that dutifully humanizes this resolutely proud but beleaguered community. We'll talk about the film and his new book when Kevin Powell joins us today in Hour 2. In our third hour, two conversations. Up first, celebrating the Underground Railroad, more specifically, the Chicago-Detroit Freedom Trail, on which many journeyed to freedom. We'll be joined by researcher and author Larry McClellan at the top of Hour 3. On the B side of Hour 3, the co-host of Entertainment Tonight, Nichelle Turner, is here to help us unpack some trending entertainment stories, including the ongoing actors' strike and the continuing Jada Pinkett Smith drama. Talk about oversharing. That's just me, though. Anyway, let's begin today's show talking politics with a guy who never overshares, the Washington bureau chief of Mother Jones and best-selling author of American Psychosis, David Corn. David Corn, good to have you back. How are you today, sir?
Great to be with you, Tavis. How are you?
Man, if I complained I'd be an ingrate, I am doing well and delighted, as always, to be in dialogue with you. Let me just get started. A lot of trending stuff, obviously. You and I both know this, being in this business. It's really feast or famine. Some days there's precious little news, and other days there's too much news to cover, and we've been in this too much news frame for a few weeks now, and it's hard to know on any given day where to start the conversation. There's Trump news, there is Israel-Hamas news, there is House Speaker news, etc., etc., etc. Let me start with the House Speaker. This has been, we call it a haunted house around here. It's a house of horrors. And the fact that Jim Jordan was on the verge of becoming Speaker was scary for me in a variety of ways. That is not going to happen. Now there are a ton of folk who suggest they intend to run for Speaker. Broadly speaking, and we'll narrow as we move through the hour, but broadly speaking, what do you make of this brouhaha, this mess that is the U.S. House?
I have no idea. Well, in terms of what's going to happen, I mean, anyone can, what to make of the mess. It's a mess. It's chaos. It's dysfunction. Now, it's not surprising. I mean, I go into this in my book, American Psychosis. This has been long in coming, going back to Newt Gingrich and the Tea Party and Sarah Palin. The Republican Party moved to these extremes in which it fed a radicalized Republican base that was driven by grievance, in some cases racism, and by anti-government fervor. And they elected all these folks who don't want to come to Washington and do anything except shoot down government, get on Fox News, and get attention for tweets. Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. Jim Jordan's like that. He ran for the House Speaker. He's been in the House 16 years. He's never once passed a single piece of legislation. He's just about trolling and holding hearings to support false narratives that the deep state is out to get Donald Trump and other conservatives. It's, and so this is, you do this long enough and you end up with people in the House Republican caucus who don't give a damn about protecting the institution or the institution even working. People say, well, if we shut, it has to at least work so we don't end up shutting down the government. They say, no, we want to shut down the government. That's what we're here to do, despite all the pain it would cause millions of Americans and the cost it would impose on American taxpayers. They want, it's like the Joker in the Batman movies, the Dark Knight Returns particularly. The Joker likes chaos.
Yeah.
He wants chaos. Chaos is his friend. And so we have this rump group of Republicans in the House who were election denialists. They're backing Trump despite Trump's indictments and his efforts to overturn the U.S. Constitution. And no surprise, they can't get together because they're only a part of the caucus. They can't work with others to try to come up with a speaker candidate who all Republicans can support, somebody who, even if they're far right, even if they're a Trump supporter, would still have some allegiance to the institution and some sense of responsibility.
It is chaotic, to be sure. And speaking of getting together, they are getting together today. House Republicans meeting today to hold a candidate forum for aspiring speaker nominees to present their visions for the conference. So this story continues, and so will this conversation when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac, perfection like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Come with 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Dilly, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bustin', truckin'. Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com. Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with SCHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
In Big Tobacco's Fantasyland, children are the future. Here, tobacco companies are committed to higher education, offering scholarships to students who submit essays about the benefits of vaping. The tobacco industry even sponsors summer camps for kids. Don't worry, the tobacco-sponsored programs have been linked to leaving your kids more interested in smoking. In Big Tobacco's Fantasyland, the world's deadliest industry is your child's friend. See reality at undo.org.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look, and unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at the gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com.
Walk to Save Lives. Join the American Heart Association's Los Angeles Heart and Stroke Walk, Sunday, October 22nd at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Team up with friends and family and walk to end heart and stroke. Every step you take and every dollar raised will help save lives and make our community a healthier place for all. Learn more and sign up for free at heartwalkla.org. Sponsored by Optum, UCLA Health, Providence, Keck Medicine of USC, and Dignity Health.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and David Korn, the Washington Bureau Chief from Mother Jones, author of the best-selling book American Psychosis, is our guest in this first hour as we talk politics, and God knows there's a whole lot to get to in these next 45 minutes. Let me stay for a moment or two longer here, David, with this House speakership drama. How do you think the Democrats are playing this? There was a great conversation to be had a few weeks ago when all this drama started about whether or not Democrats would save Kevin McCarthy. There was talk, as you recall, that Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, minority leader, might cut some deal with McCarthy to extract certain things from him in exchange for a few Democratic votes that would have allowed him to remain Speaker. The thinking is it's better to dance with the devil you know than to deal with the devil that you don't know. Clearly, whatever one thinks of Kevin McCarthy, at least in my mind, Jim Jordan would have been worse, given who he is and what he represents. Not that McCarthy is an angel, but I'm not sure it gets any better than McCarthy, however one defines better. That said, not a lot for Democrats to do at the moment, per se. They're sitting back and watching this play out. I guess in the long run, this is good strategy, or as George Bush might say, strategery. This is a good strategery for Democrats long term, because if you believe the data that we're getting, that based upon redistricting, Democrats are going to pick up a number of seats, at a minimum 6, likely more, in competitive races. So it's very, very possible, very likely, in fact, that Hakeem Jeffries, come this time next year, will be on the verge of being the first African-American Speaker of the House. So I see the long-term strategy, letting the country see these Republicans being inept at being able to pick even a speaker, much less to govern the House. That's the long-term strategy. In the short run, to your point, we have a government that is dysfunctional, and there's precious little at the moment that Democrats can do about it. So my large question is, how do you think the Democrats have and are playing this particular moment?
You know, there's an old saying in politics: when your opponent comes out, pours gasoline all over himself, and lights the match, you shouldn't get in the way. There was talk about a deal with McCarthy, although that was not serious talk. There was more serious talk last week about the Democrats, agreeing to let Patrick McHenry, who is sort of the temporary speaker at the moment, who is a Republican, but has he has no power other than to basically handle the speakership vote. So, but there was talk about granting him more powers to act as a speaker for at least a couple of months to get through a government shutdown and get these aid packages to Ukraine or Israel through the Congress. And I think Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries and others were indicating, yes, they would maybe agree to this bipartisan deal under the right circumstances, and talked about looking for bipartisan solutions to the current mess. That idea was quickly shot down by the Republicans and the Republican caucus. So maybe it will emerge again, and maybe Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats can find a way to help the Republicans get out of this mess. I don't think it's going to be by cutting a deal that's going to install a particular Republican as speaker. But I think right now, whether it was McCarthy or Jordan, you had people running for the speakership who had denied the 2020 election. They had, they were now promoting this baseless impeachment crusade against the Democratic president, Joe Biden, and mucking up everything else, supporting Donald Trump, who has an authoritarian plan to implement should he become president, who has spoken against the Constitution, has made racist remarks, anti-Semitic remarks. I don't see why any Democrat in their right mind would just vote for either of these two guys unless the deal was just so overwhelmingly positive, which is hard to envision. So I think so far they've been pretty smart. They haven't rescued McCarthy. They certainly weren't going to rescue Jordan. And they've been looking to see if things get to such a point that enough Republicans, doesn't have to be all Republicans, but enough House Republicans decide, we are falling apart here. We need to come up with some bipartisan compromise. And if there are enough Republicans who say that, eventually, then I think Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats are ready to move in and do something.
Yeah, of course.
Until that happens,
yeah,
they're just watching the train crash.
Until that happens, we have a dysfunctional government, and so we can say this all day long that we're watching a train wreck. At the end of the day, though, David, and I'm just playing devil's advocate for the sake of argument, we have a dysfunctional government at the moment. Democrats are attempting to do nothing about that. I digress on that point. Let me ask you this: the eyes of the world are always on the U.S. For any number of reasons at any given time. At the moment, the eyes of the world are on us, given our engagement and involvement in a proxy war, as I see it, with Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine. The eyes of the world are on us, given what we're doing to aid and abet Israel in its war against Hamas. So the eyes of the world are on this country. At this moment, with all of that attention, that we can't figure out the speakership of our House, how do you think the world sees us right about now in that regard?
I think it's terrible for the U.S. image abroad. I think, Biden, whether you like what he's doing or not in terms of, how he's handling the Israeli side of things, he is an engaged politician, an engaged president running diplomacy to deal with that issue and while dealing with Ukraine. And Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is doing the same thing. They look like they're at least working and trying to do whatever it is they want to do. But the House Republicans look like their own petty squabbles are more important to them than than the plight of the world and these wars and these conflicts or anything that's happening here at home. And I think that doesn't help, the American image abroad. But I think it's very particular to the House Republicans, and that people understand that they represent just, a slice of America and just a piece of the American government. But it's just quite amazing to me that that they're so extreme, so extreme and committed to their own radicalism and their hate of government and their hate of Barack Obama and Joe Biden and whatever else it is, that they can't pull together and come up amongst themselves with some way to move forward. And it looks awful, but Americans voted these guys in, and we'll see. It will look even more awful if next year they keep in people who show that they can't do the job.
Yeah. Let me pivot then, since you raised Blinken and Biden with respect to Israel and Hamas. Yeah. Let me pivot to that, and we'll spend some time on that, and again some other issues I want to cover in this hour. But let me just try this on you for size and see how it fits. See how you wear this garment or dislike this garment. As you were talking a moment ago about the fact that Republicans represent just a slice of government, just a slice of support in America writ large, my mind went to Hamas, because Hamas is the duly elected governing authority in Palestine, but they too represent just a slice of the Palestinian people. And yet, increasingly, the commentary that I'm reading, never mind Blinken and Biden trying to suggest that Hamas is not Palestine, that's not what's happening in the American debate about this. Either you're on the Israeli side or you're on the Palestinian side. And nobody seems to make the point that you just made about Republicans, that they don't represent all of us. Indeed, when Donald Trump was president, 70+ million votes, but he didn't represent all of us. And yet I'm seeing that distinction, that line of demarcation, get more and more blurry every day when it comes to our discourse about Israel and Hamas. Does that pivot make sense to you?
It does, and it saddens me, because when I look at what's happening in the Middle East, this is personal here, I can look at what happened with the Hamas attack and recoil at it with horror at the way they massacred civilians. I believe the deliberate targeting of civilians in any military conflict is just immoral, wrong, and violates the rule of law. And how that, and it's just so obvious. And then when I see what's happening in Gaza with the counterstrikes and the thousands of civilians who have been killed and driven from their homes and had their homes destroyed, I see that as wrong as well. And I feel empathy for both sides and yearn for a solution that will protect the right and dignity and security of people on each side of the border. Gaza and Israel includes the West Bank, the occupied territories in the West Bank as well. And yet, we have this sort of tribalistic, instinct that drives people from one side to the other, and you either have to be pro this or an anti that, or pro that and anti this, and it is quite discouraging. And I see there's graffiti happening around the world, calling for killing Jews, and I see people like Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, Republican, who a few days ago said he wants to see Israel bounce the rubble in Gaza. Bounce the rubble? That means more civilian deaths and creating also more, agony, misery, and hatred, which is not going to lead to any solution of the deep-rooted problem here. So, why it's so difficult to call each other out, call out the wrong on each side, I don't quite get. I'm for Palestinian rights, and I'm against Hamas. And I think what they did was an act that violates every tenet of morality and rules of law. And that I don't understand why that seems to be a difficult position to hold.
It is difficult to hold for too many people, which takes me now to a piece I read last night. This morning I read so many pieces from Nick Kristof in the Times. Nick is a brilliant writer, brilliant thinker, and he doesn't need any help from me, but this audience will attest that last week on more than one occasion I said and have said that part of the problem for me in this regard, David, is that too many Palestinians, I think, don't think that the life of a Jewish baby has the same value of the life of a Palestinian baby. And too many Jews don't think that a Palestinian baby has the same value and worth of a life as the life of a Jewish baby. I said that multiple times last week on this program. So Nick Kristof is all over the New York Times today, and everybody's commenting on his piece. He makes the very same point about the value of these lives not being viewed as the same by either side. And so now, Tavis says it last week. Nick Kristof says it now. And everybody's talking about it. I am mad at him. He is Nick Kristof in the New York Times rather, and I am not. I get that. But I'm glad that Nick made this point because, again, everybody is now discussing the issue that Nick raises in his piece. He's catching some hell for it, to be sure. But at the end of the day, that seems to me to be at the epicenter of why this war rages for year and decade and century after century, it seems. Your take on that particular point, that not enough people engaged and involved in this value the life of each other as much as they value their own lives.
Yeah, I agree. I think people get too caught up on one side of a tribalistic divide and don't, and start dehumanizing the other side. It's quite clear that the Hamas attackers dehumanized the Iraqi civilians and the 260 young adults who had a rave. The way they deliberately slaughtered them on purpose is horrific. And the same way that the strikes in Gaza are taking as many, if not more, lives. The Palestinian lives matter as much as the Israeli lives. And to see pro-Palestinian rallies which support the rights of Palestinians, which is something that I do agree with, but to ignore Hamas or to have even sometimes to have people who are pro-Hamas or have slogans that seem to imply support for Hamas, I think it's dreadful in the same way that you have Israelis who are calling for revenge and for wiping out Gaza.
And that's the question, David, for me at this point. The question is, after all that Joe Biden has said and done and continues to say and do in support of Israel, almost without reservation, whether or not at this point he can have them pull back on this mission to crush and destroy. It seems to me that once you get that far out in your support of Israel, it's hard to tell Bibi and company to pull back, to be measured in their response when they've already said they want to crush and destroy, and you've done nothing to stop that.
Yeah, I've been writing a lot about that the last few days in my newsletter. People can go to davidcorn.com to sign up. And it seems to me that what Biden has this very clear strategy. He is in public supporting Bibi, sending more aid to him, and meanwhile, in private conversations that he, Blinken, and others are having with their Israeli counterparts, they're basically warning them not to go in too far, too deep, too long. And they've been saying, and it's interesting to me, they've been saying, look at what happened to America after 9/11. We were fueled by rage, and Bush and Cheney exploited that to not just attack go to Afghanistan, but then to attack Iraq. And what happened? We had a disastrous war that destabilized the region. 4,000 or so American soldiers were dead. Over 200,000 Iraqi civilians, not fighters, but civilians, were killed in the violence that ensued after our invasion of Iraq. And so they've been making that point again and again, and basically leaning on them. And there are people within the Israeli cabinet who have basically called, and this has been reported extensively, for not just an all-out attack in Gaza, but to attack Hezbollah in the north, in southern Lebanon, and expand the war, which could bring Iran into it.
No,
you can have this regional conflict.
Let me talk about that when we come forward. Whether or not we get into a wider war, that is the concern here. That Biden now cannot pull Bibi back in their effort to crush and destroy, but now there are concerns on top of that about a wider war. We're talking to David Corn. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee says it's necessary to provide aid to Palestinian civilians in Gaza during the Israel-Hamas war. Speaking on Fox News Sunday, Washington State Democratic Congressman Adam Smith said without the aid, civilians in Gaza will starve, and he doesn't want to see 2 million Palestinians die. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is calling on Republicans to work with Democrats to elect a speaker after Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan failed to get the votes to be speaker for a third time. Jeffries called on Republicans to break with extremists. The African-American House Minority Leader signaled he's open to expanding the power of interim Speaker Patrick McHenry or another Republican who Democrats approve of. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Hey, if you're thinking of getting the latest iPhone, you need to stop and check out the wireless offer from Boost Infinite. For more, just pick up your phone and dial pound 250 and say Boost Infinite. That's pound 250 and Boost Infinite. You'll have the option to receive a one-time auto-dialed text message from this station's network.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. Shopping for new blinds? At Blindster, we offer over 50 different blinds, shades, and shutters at low prices, custom made for your windows, and shipping is free. Shop at home and order 10 free samples of any product before you buy. Blindster.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Tough day yesterday for both of LA's NFL teams. The Rams lose at home to Pittsburgh by a touchdown. The Chargers lose at Kansas City by 2 touchdowns. The Rams failed to score in the fourth quarter. They dropped to 3-4. 3 of their 4 losses have come at SoFi. The Rams are at home next Sunday against Chicago. The Chargers are now 2-4. They went scoreless the entire second half at KC. The Chargers are at Dallas next Sunday. The top 5 in this week's AP college football rankings: Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, and Washington. USC, which has lost 2 straight, fell to 24th. UCLA at 5-2 is ranked 23rd. It's the first time UCLA has been ranked ahead of USC in the polls since 2012. UCLA is at home this Saturday against Deion Sanders in Colorado. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Ariva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Ariva Martin in real time when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
The Green Foundation, key health influencer, empowering our Black communities through action. The Green Foundation advocates for affordable health care, accessibility, and knows the importance of culturally relatable health care. Regardless of income, we believe it is a right for optimum health. The Green Foundation has been at the forefront for 25 years, dedicated solely to promoting prevention through early detection, annual screenings, and nutrition. We know you because we are you. Our hand-holding approach supports you and your family to receive your right to be treated fairly and receiving quality healthcare services. We want you and your family to know COVID-19 was devastating to our families and to our wallet. We can build back better by understanding prevention, wearing your mask, washing your hands, social distancing, and understanding the impact of long COVID. Get the care you deserve. Take advantage of your privileges. Contact us, info@thegreenfoundation.net. info@thegreenfoundation.net.
Motor Trend Group, LLC, seeks a release manager, web, and mobile platforms in El Segundo, California to develop next generation of Motor Trend software platforms for MotorTrend.com and Motor Trend streaming app. Remote work permitted. Send resume to Tyler Williams, Discovery Communications, LLC, 265 Brookview Center Way, Suite 401, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37919.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
Tavis Smiley and David Korn. David Korn, of course, is the Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones and the best-selling author of American Psychosis. We're talking politics in this first hour. It's going to be a great show today, but so many trending stories to get to in this first hour. Let me keep moving here. Before I move past Israel, not past, move on from Israel and Hamas. You can't move past it. No way to do that these days. Israel is launching these intense airstrikes. This ground war is underway and on the way, David Korn. And the thing for me, and I said this again last week on this program, Biden is getting great credit from those who think he did the right thing, at least by going to Israel when he did. And yet every one of us knew that the minute Air Force One took off, plans were moving forward to, again, crush and destroy. So that ground war that we expected just had a reprieve only because Biden was in the region, was in the area, in Israel to be exact. But now the ground offensive is going to take off, and they again are going to, these are Bibi's words, crush and destroy. But it raises some concerns on their other border, the Lebanon border, about whether or not this war will get wider. And here's what I'm concerned about. Everywhere you go, people are talking about whether or not we're on the verge of World War III. Depending on how aggressive Israel is in Gaza, it means that you have these other Arab nations who are standing by watching this happen. And it raises a fundamental question of how much Israel is going to get away with as others watch. And we expect them, the Biden administration is trying to keep them on the sideline. I'm not so sure, depending on, again, how aggressive Israel goes at this, whether or not the Biden administration, Biden, Blinken, can be successful at keeping these other Arab nations on the sideline. And if you can't do that, then we are into a wider war.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that's, I think Biden's game plan here is to be supportive of Bibi and Israel in public and to use that, beyond the scenes to try to prevent a greater catastrophe. So he's not calling for a ceasefire or pause in the fighting now, as some progressives and Democrats and others have been calling for, because I think they're more concerned, and I hate to use it that way because the death of anybody in a war like is happening now is a tragedy. But I think that they want to make sure that this terrible war doesn't become more terrible, and they calculate the way to do that is to be supportive publicly while leaning privately. Now, the question that that comes to mind here is that we give $3.8 billion a year to Israel from military assistance. And we do the same with Egypt. It's part of the Camp David Accords from the Jimmy Carter days. And now Biden is going and asking for $14 billion more over the course of several years for military assistance to Israel. So there is a fair amount of leverage here. You could condition that aid on not taking Israel not taking certain actions, stopping these settlements that are provocative on the occupied West Bank. There are things you could do, in private, if you're willing to do that. And it's unclear to what extent Biden is using that stick. But right now, it's pretty clear that the most popular politician in Israel at the moment is Joe Biden. There have been demonstrations calling for Netanyahu to resign. Gigantic this past weekend. You have columnists. You have political figures. I mean, this is unlike what happened here in 9/11, where people rallied around George W. Bush, even though his administration had kind of dropped the ball and had not paid attention to the issue of terrorism and Al-Qaeda, and had paid more attention to dealing with Saddam Hussein, and that was what they thought the threat was, that he totally screwed up, and this the warning in the summer of a possible terror attack from Al-Qaeda. And yet here, after that horrific event on 9/11, no one, there wasn't much blame for him popular, and people rallied around him. That's not what's happening in Israel, where there's a lot of popular reaction against Netanyahu.
To put a finer point on it, in some respects, Joe Biden right now is more popular in Israel than he is in these states. I say that not to be tongue in cheek, but there are literally billboards popping up all over Israel, thanking and loving on Joe Biden. I mean, there's a billboard campaign all across the country where Joe Biden's face is appearing on these massive billboards. He is more popular in Israel right now than even Bibi Netanyahu is, and there's evidence to sort of prove that. Let me come back to this. My final point on this. I think we got to move on to cover a couple other things right quick here. There are two things that I'm having difficulty navigating. Let me see, given that you are much brighter than I am, whether you can help me on these two things. One is the speech the president gave last week, where he's asking for more money for both Ukraine and Israel. And it's clear, to me at least, that one country you're giving money to because you don't want them to be occupied by the Russians. Another country you're giving money to as they are, in fact, occupiers in real time. That dichotomy doesn't work for me, number one. Number two, what also doesn't work for me is that you're giving weapons to one country in the Middle East, Israel, more weapons to them, but humanitarian aid to the other side. I mean, I'm not stuck on stupid. I get it politically, but it is so hollow that you're arming one side and you're giving aid to the other side that will help them once they get bombed by the other side. I mean, it's a strange thing, David.
No, I've written about that over the years. I think there's something particularly absurd about this. We're funding the bombs, and then we're funding the Band-Aids.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, and like, what if we just didn't have the bombs and the attacks, then we wouldn't need the Band-Aids, right? But we're in this position where we've become the number one supporter of Israel as part of the Camp David Accords. You got to go back to that, and we give just as much money to Egypt, which itself has a government that's repressive and that's locking down on dissent, and is not rushing, I have to say, to help the Palestinians. They're letting some aid go through the southern border, which is with Egypt, but in Gaza. But they're not, they're not, they don't want, Gazan refugees, coming into Egypt and to help them. So we're funding both sides of that to bring about a peace. A peace between Israel and Egypt, not a peace in the region, and therefore we're supporting the Israeli military as it attacks Gaza. There is something. There are a lot of absurdities, and here Trump made nice with the Saudis who have supported terrorism over the years, the 9/11 guys. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff in the Middle East that if you think about it too hard, it hurts your head.
No,
and it breaks your heart.
No, it does both.
Breaks your heart.
It does both.
I don't want my money going to the bombs that are doing this, but then also, for those of us who say Israel, there should be a ceasefire or pause. That's true. At the same time, we need pressure, to stop Hamas from doing the attacks it does. We need pressure to stop Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a fundamentalist militia run by Iran that has more power in Lebanon than the Lebanese government or the Lebanese military.
Let's hope that Bibi doesn't make the mistake that is of going after Hezbollah. That would be a real problem.
Yes.
World War III happens tomorrow if that happens. You mentioned Donald Trump. When we come forward, I want to talk about Donald Trump. There are at least two things that I want to get David's temperature on, take his temperature on. One, there are now, 3 or 4 people in this case brought by Fannie Willis, the sister DA down in Fulton County in Atlanta. 3 or 4 of these persons now have all pled guilty. So one by one, they are turning on Donald Trump. Want to get David's read on that, including, of course, Sidney Powell, who Trump now claims was never his attorney. She was never my attorney. Okay, Mr. Trump, we'll get David's take on that. And first there was a gag order, and in very short order, which we knew was going to happen, Donald Trump violated the gag order for which he's been fined. What does it mean? And is that gag order constitutional anyway? Jeffrey Toobin says it is. Erwin Tremorinsky says it's not. Go figure. More with David Corn when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. And I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
Yeah, this is Lathan and Tyler. Main reason that's very important for me to be here is just to leave a legacy for my kids. Black wealth, generational wealth is what we need in our community, Oh, Chase, someone has to take the lead. They're showing, big business like Chase cares, and, they're putting their money where their mouth is at, So it's good to see, big institution like Chase, giving a lifting hand, to the community. And, you got to respect that. It makes me want to bank with Chase and, give them, another look if I go to another institution. I actually see what Chase is doing for the community.
That's right. Chase is doing their part to help advance Black wealth. For more money support, tune in every day from 12 to 2 to KBLA Talk 1580's Midday Money Chain, right here.
At Susan G. Komen, we believe that ending breast cancer needs all of us working together. Because if you've just been diagnosed and don't know where to turn, we've got you. If you can't afford the treatment you need, we've got you. And if you are driven to honor the loved one you've just lost, we have a place for you here. Because of you, we're supporting those who need help today while tirelessly searching for tomorrow's cures. Visit Komen.org and be a part of our Susan G. Komen community today.
As veterans, we're no strangers to helping others.
That's what we were taught, service before self.
But we do have one question for the veterans listening.
When was the last time you reached out for help?
If you or someone you know needs resources, whether it's for stress, finances, employment, or mental health, don't wait. Reach out.
Find more information at va.gov/reach. That's va.gov/reach.
Brought to you by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and the Ad Council.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
All right, David Corn, let's move to some Trump news. You mentioned Trump, and let's go there right quick. One, these stories are developing, it seems, by the day where many of these persons accused, indicted, arraigned by Fannie Willis down in Atlanta, Fulton County, are starting to plead guilty one by one. I've lost count now. I think there are 4, but 3 or 4 of them have pled guilty already, including the most recent big story, Sidney Powell, who Trump now claims was never his attorney in the first place. It's even nonsensical to respond to that craziness. But my question is, what you make of where this case, this particular case, there are many, where this case is headed, so long as these persons keep dropping like flies and pleading guilty. But they put it that way, yeah.
Let's look at the big picture for a second. Right now, we had Sidney Powell plead guilty. And last week, at the end of the week, we had Kenneth Cheeseborough plead guilty. Cheeseborough is the guy who came up with the whole scheme to come up with fake electors and send them in and create a conflict, a controversy that shouldn't exist to try to stop the certification of Joe Biden's electoral college victory. A lot of people blame John Eastman, another lawyer, for being the lead person on that effort, but it really was Kenneth Cheeseborough who came up with this idea and advocated it within Trump circles and with Trump himself. And so the big picture, Tavis, you have 2 Trump lawyers, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Cheeseborough, who both confirmed with their guilty pleas, they have confirmed that crimes were committed in this effort to overturn the 2020 election, that it just wasn't a thing that was done, wasn't just politics, it was criminal. Who says so? Trump's own lawyers say so by agreeing to plead guilty to these charges. They are saying they were part of a criminal activity that was part of this effort to thwart the election so that Donald Trump could retain power. I think this is tremendously dramatic, and should be front page news for weeks. His own lawyers are now saying this was a criminal activity, and so that to me is the big poetic picture. On the more down to earth picture, it means big trouble for Trump's legal team and for Trump himself. Yeah. The part of these deals, and the other people who plead guilty are much lower down on the ladder of the totem pole. But with Sidney Powell and Kenneth Cheeseborough, they have both agreed to basically tell all, hand over emails and documents to Fannie Willis's team, and this information can be shared with Jack Smith, who's prosecuting the federal case against Donald Trump. And so you have people who now admitted to committing crimes who are going to be talking about their interactions with Donald Trump and others within his inner circle.
So that
highly, highly, highly significant to the prosecution of Trump, both in Atlanta and here in Washington, D.C.
All right, that's Atlanta. Let me come to D.C. when we come forward, because in that particular case, there was a gag order, and it didn't take long for Trump to violate it. The question is whether or not the gag order is constitutional to begin with. We'll talk about that in our remaining moments with David Corn. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between 2 turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions.
Stay Housed LA has the resources you need to know your rights and the legal support to back them up. The COVID-19 pandemic has cost people their jobs and livelihoods. This has left an estimated 1/3 of households not being able to make rent and facing losing their homes. This is a fear no one in our community should have to face. You have rights, though, and Stay Housed LA is here to help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, and local community and legal service providers. Together, they provide tenants with the information and support needed to exercise their rights so they can remain safely in their homes. Find out more about your rights by participating in a virtual tenant workshop. Get the legal assistance you need. Find additional resources in Los Angeles County and the City of Los Angeles. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA County for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. That's stayhousedla.org. Or call their hotline at 213-694-0040. We've got your black with a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
Got a few minutes left here to cover one last piece of business in this first hour with our guest, David Corn, the Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones. Love that publication, and author of best-selling author of the book American Psychosis, now out in paperback. David, so one last piece of Trump business here. So this gag order that Judge Tanya Chutkin, this is the sister judge. We got a sister DA down in Fulton County, a sister judge in this particular case in D.C. And she put a gag order in and basically told Trump, don't talk. You can talk about me. She didn't say that, but that was the suggestion because he'd already done that. But you can't talk about my court workers. You can't talk about my my apparatus here. You can't. So he was off limits to say certain things about certain people, and it raises all kinds of questions as to whether or not this gag order was or is constitutional. Over the weekend, I read a couple pieces. One by Jeffrey Toobin, who argued that it was, in fact, the right thing to do. The other by Erwin Chemerinsky, both brilliant legal minds, who said this is a real problem. It's not constitutional. Your take on that?
It's a fascinating subject, and I'm not a constitution scholar, but I've long wondered about the constitutionality of gag orders, because as a journalist, I often want to get information out of court trials or out of the people involved in trials, and when they say there's a gag order, as a reporter, I think, well, is that a improper infringement on their right to speak and my right as a reporter to convey information? And so I think this is an issue that the judicial system has largely sidestepped for its entire existence here in the United States. It seems it's also it's one of these issues where there's competing interests. It's illegal to tamper with a jury, right? It's illegal to intimidate witnesses. How do you intimidate witnesses? Sometimes it's by saying, we know where your daughter lives. Now, free speech will let you say that, but the purpose of that free speech is to intimidate. So, I would argue, or I think where I would land is that you don't have a defendant doesn't have the right to say anything. They have a lot of liberty to talk about the case in general, but in terms of doing anything that might seem like it intimidates a member of the court, someone in jury, another witness, another defendant, that the judge has the right to say you can't intimidate. Yeah. You can criticize, but you can't intimidate. Well, that might be a fine line.
Yeah, it is a fine line, and my sense is Trump and his lawyers are going to test the strength the strength of that line, that fine line. We shall see. If they have their way, they'll go bursting right through it. We'll leave it there for now. David Corn will do it again somewhere down the road. All the best to you. Thanks for your insights. Good to have you back on this program.
Great to talk to you, Tavis.
All right, be well, David. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Without the aid, civilians in Gaza will starve, and he doesn't want to see 2 million Palestinians die. House